Hey Jenna, welcome to my suite. Let's have a little sleepover.
Hi, Eshita. Thank you so much for inviting me into your hotel suite today. Can I just ask where we are?
We are at the Cadogan, and thanks for joining me, Jenna.
Pleasure. So, why did you choose the Cadogan Hotel?
You know what? I've been here for quite a few meetings, investor meetings, work meetings, and also at lunch. What I had never done was actually stay.
So, you said just then that you've been here before for meetings in a former life. So, obviously, that's where your kind of career started, wasn't it? And that's where I want to kind of start, because of all the guests we've had on the show to date and the fabulous ones we've got coming up, I think you're the only person that has done such an extreme pivot from a financial services background essentially to fashion. So can I kind of ask you to go back to the beginning? How did ByRotation come about? How did you make that move?
So it's been 5.5 years since I founded ByRotation, and I founded it as a side hustle. So I was still working full-time at a distressed debt hedge fund, investing in corporate bonds, which is so different to what I do today.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And honestly, it came from a first world problem, which was I was going on my honeymoon, which, as you know, is like a trip of a lifetime.
Yeah.
You want to wear the best outfits ever. And I remember back in 2019, there was this culture of outfit of the day. OOTD, which was a big thing. Yeah. And I thought, well, I want to wear amazing outfits to my honeymoon, which is the desert in India. So I started thinking about how it would be so cool to wear these designer, high-quality, contemporary dresses. But quickly I realized, well, these are like over £2,000 a dress.
Yeah.
Why don't we have some sort of solution where I can rent, like a rental platform or a rental store? And so I started, I guess, looking at what there was out there in the market, and it became very clear to me that all the incumbents were very inventory heavy. They had like corporate outfits, or they had like, black ties or like ball gowns or hats that you could rent, or like, your morning suits and things like that. But nothing like this beautiful long maxi dress that I could wear for a pop of color in the desert. So that's when I started thinking about this idea, and I was like, okay, well, for the shopaholic that I am, I'm going to buy all these new outfits now for my honeymoon, and God knows if I'll like them after this trip. But here we go. Bought all these things before my honeymoon. And it wasn't actually until the honeymoon, so back in Rajasthan where I was born, which is also where a lot of textiles in India are produced. So when it says made in India, it's very likely that there's a high likelihood that it's coming from Rajasthan or Calcutta.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and I hadn't been back for 14 years. I wanted to show my husband, who's not Indian, my roots and kind of show him where I'm from. And that's when I witnessed a lot of textile waste. So in suburban towns, such as where I was born, I had seen a lot of textile waste just on the streets, on the road. And I was like, this is strange, because I'm such a consumerist in the Western world. I'm buying all these new clothes for this trip. Don't know if I'll wear them ever again, because I'm not sure I liked all my outfits. And I don't know, I'm probably going to end up donating them to charity. And it turns out that 90% of what you donate to all these charities ends up in landfills in African and Asian countries.
What?
Yeah. Which
See, I did not know that.
Yeah, you think you're doing something great by like donating something on the high street to these charity local shops. But it turns out a lot of it is just dumped back into these so-called developing countries. And I just thought, this idea that I have for, this fashion sharing rental solution, why don't I make it a fashion sharing economy so that people can just share what they already have with each other, and we can all consume less and dump less into these developing nations. Most of my friends outside this world, they're all very corporate women or men. Yeah, they're very corporate people. They work as lawyers, bankers, consultants. And I told them about this idea, and they were like, this is weird. Like, we know you love fashion, Eshita, but we don't love it as much as you do. So I don't know how I feel about like lending out my my sort of like outfits that aren't very fashionable and chic anyway. You're the one who like is the fashionable person in the group. So maybe for like a wedding or something I might rent, but I wouldn't really use it every week or every month. So I don't know if we're your target customers. And that's when I kind of realized that actually, if you look at the life cycle, you know, the adoption of a new product, you need to think about your early adopters. And that made me realize it wasn't the group of people that I usually hang out with. These were going to be my main customers a few years later, once we had reached a certain point of maturity. Yeah. So for me, I needed to look for fashion insiders as our early adopters to make it cool, to make it acceptable, to write about it, to give their sort of tick, you know, their seal of approval.
I know exactly.
So I was sort of kind of trying to understand how to navigate this world. And I realized that there was no point trying to create this sort of strategy into breaking into this sort of high school, you know, cliques or whatever. I was like, I'm just going to build my own tribe. And my tribe is someone who cares about sustainability. And she's a pretty pragmatic woman. And that required me to network the ass of myself. Like I would go in the evenings after work, because I founded it on the side while still working full time. I would go to a bunch of like industry events that weren't very sexy or cool because you need to get invited to those.
Yeah.
I would just go to a lot of these Eventbrite events that had like, you know, smaller, I guess more independent founders within sustainability and fashion. And I'd go in the evenings, I'd go on the weekends. I think I probably averaged like 4 networking or events a week. And I'd always sit in the front row and ask a question after the panel. And I'd introduce myself, even though my company meant nothing. You know, it had like 200 followers on Instagram, which were all my friends. And I was begging them all, hey, I just posted something. Can you please like it? Can you please comment?
I've been there. Yeah.
And that's really how I sort of started building my tribe. So I think a lot of the people that I know, especially from the early days, are people who, you know, have known me for such a long time and they've seen the journey grow, and they're very much still centered around sustainability. I think that's something that we always come back to as a business.
There's a lot of USP, isn't it, really? That's sort of like, because I've read a few of the interviews that you've done and obviously sort of done my research around before chatting to you. And what really resonated with me as well is what you just mentioned about like finding your tribe and that perception of the fashion world or the entertainment world or the luxury space in which we both operate. If you're not from a certain background, as you say,
they won't let you in.
I came from rural Wales and yes, I was lucky to have a fabulous education, but you know, I'm not born and bred London. I don't move in those circles. And I have found it so challenging to kind of break into that space for that reason.
To be given a chance.
Exactly. And so I'm so passionate about what you just said about it's about your merit, and you'll judge me on how good a job I'm doing for you, not, you know, if I've got a double-barreled surname or if, you know, I went to a certain school or I know a certain person. It still exists so much. And I love to hear you say that you kind of faced that and just bulldozed your way through and kind of created this tribe in such an organic way.
The turning point for me, I figured out, was apparently working in finance was seen as a negative. I was like, oh, you have to work in finance. You have to like work in a well-paid job. That must mean that you're not from the right background. And I was just very puzzled by that. And I think for me, I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue networking and finding my tribe. And I'm going to build the best product out there, which is the app itself, the platform. And then no one can say she's a random person. She's building this random business called ByRotation. Once they started seeing that the product, the platform actually works beautifully, they were like, okay, there's something there. She's actually kind of smart and we can't just keep ignoring her. And I think I was very lucky that quite in the early days, we had some amazing fashion editors like Lucy Siegel, who has been such a champion of sustainability, you know, cover us in broadsheet press. You know, we were very early on in the Sunday Times style on the weekend about 3 women wearing the same dress. And it was just, it was, I think, that buy-in from the fashion editors that made the rest of the industry go like, this is not going anywhere, and she's kind of legit. So I'm very grateful for those connections.
Would you say, I don't mean for this to be a leading question, but do you act from the heart or the head?
I think definitely more the head. But again, sometimes I walk into a room.
Yeah.
Or I walk into a situation and my gut just tells me what to do right away.
Okay.
And then I'll look for, I guess, confirmation bias. I'll think about everything that's happening around, or I'll look for clues. And I'll be like, I was right.
Yeah.
I knew it. But I did deliberate. So it does kind of help me justify why I made that decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like, it's been 5.5 years running this business. I definitely feel like my gut has gotten stronger. And you see this happen in waves. You know, one day this is really hot, and then the next day it's not hot anymore. So I think I've become seasoned that way. But definitely everything has to have a purpose.
Can we have a look at what's under the cloches? So what have you ordered for us today?
I'm trying to remember, but I ordered for us a salad. Let me see if
there we go. Very healthy.
Oh my god, it's so beautiful, and it matches our outfits.
Well,
which is amazing.
I like to all my meals to match my outfit.
I love it. That's why I picked it for us.
That is so healthy and colourful. I'm very impressed.
I definitely am a very creative person. If I had all the money in the world, I would love to do lots and lots of creative projects, you know. But yeah, so I was a web designer since the age of 11. I was selling my websites on neopets.com. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Ooh,
it's like a Tamagotchi, but like it's a website.
Wow. So, sorry, when you were 11,
yeah,
you had a passion and a skill. And so you started developing and designing
websites. Yeah.
But how did that come about? Like how?
Self-taught. So it started with MS Paint, and I was like, this is hideous. And then I downloaded Adobe Photoshop, and then I started kind of learning through other message boards and forums. This is way before the time of even Reddit.
Yeah.
You know, and I had started becoming virtual pen pals and friends with other gamers on Neopets, where we all had virtual pets. And I grew up in Singapore, where our parents weren't fond of having pets, which is why I'm so deprived.
And that's why you love your
very little empathy. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. He's made me a completely different person. And I think that I self-taught myself web design. And I remember my parents were like, what are you doing at 2 a.m. on the computer? Like, are you looking at dirty websites? And I was like, no, I'm selling websites.
Like, yeah, no, ma'am, I'm on Neopets.
Exactly. I was selling layouts for $7 to random people on the internet, and I had a PayPal account before PayPal was even a thing. You know, and my dad was like, wait, this is actually kind of clever, but we don't allow you to speak to strangers on the internet at 2 a.m. And I was like, but they're all in the US. Like, that's the only time I can catch up with them. You know, one of them is in Tasmania, which I don't even know where it is, but now I know. So I always had this, like, community-oriented approach, and it always had to be digital. You know, I ended up founding a message board, again, before the days of Reddit, for fellow graphic designers and web designers at the age of 13. And it had, at its peak, I believe it had over 3,000 users. And it was quite like the premium of all the web designer forums. And yeah, and that's when I had my first taste of building a digital community.
So it's widely documented that you came from finance and went into fashion, but actually what we've unearthed is that...
I've always been in tech.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that creativity really is at your core.
Yeah.
And finance was a sort of stepping stone.
Means to a way.
Like, a means to a way.
Means to a way, because I had my visa sponsored by my companies.
Yeah.
To work here. But my friends very well, it's, they know it well, it's well documented. I've always been the one who is always dressing up in the latest fashions and things like that, where my friends would be like, what is Jacquemus? What is that? And I'm like, haven't you seen the pink runway in like the fields? They're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. This is not of interest to us.
So where does that love of fashion specifically come from? Like, did you, like, growing up, as your mother incredibly fashionable, or living in Singapore, was it something that you were exposed to, or do you think it's just intrinsically within you?
I think Singapore is known for being very consumerist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only two things you can do there: shop and eat. And I was really good at shopping. And I love a good deal as well. Like, I'm a great negotiator. But I think my love for fashion, actually my love for style, let's not even say fashion, because I do think the industry has a lot of question marks around it. I think my love for style comes from aesthetics. I love seeing things look good together.
Well, that leads me seamlessly into, like, my power question,
Okay.
which I like to ask everybody,
Right.
which is, I want to know, I just want to know genuinely something that sort of scares you, something that inspires you, and what you want to be known for, remembered for, your legacy.
I guess what scares me is maybe not making my parents proud. It is something that I care about a lot. And my dad has a rags to riches story, which when I was younger at the breakfast table, we would be like, oh, this story again? Like, we heard it so many times. Can we just go rollerblading with our friends? And it's funny because a lot of his life learning skills, as he used to call them, LLS, he's like, this is the stuff you won't learn in school, and you won't get grades for it. Like, it's great you're in Singapore and they really care about grades there. But he used to teach us all these sort of like street smart skills into being an entrepreneur and a business person. And they all kind of come back to me now. And I'm like, I hope that you're seeing, and I hope that you feel proud.
So that's one thing that scares you. So what's one thing that inspires you?
Saffron, my dog.
Oh, okay. Not the
spice.
Not the spice.
No.
Right.
It's a very expensive spice there.
Yes. Okay.
My dog Saffron, he is just such a joy. Just seeing the way he takes on the world every day, it just makes me feel like life can be good. It's just how you choose to view it.
Yeah.
And I think he's made me like really get in tune with my empathetic side. I just feel like a different person when I'm with him. And you know what they say? Dogs are so, like, they really kind of feel your energy and they respond to it. So if I'm having a terrible day, he's there. He knows, and he's there snuggling up. He's not saying anything back to me. He's just making me feel better and existing with me. There's a running joke in the office that I am Lady Voldemort and he is Nagini, my Horcrux, because I love Slytherin, but that's another joke.
I totally get what you mean, though. No matter how hard your day is, when those little puppy dog eyes look at you, like you're their most favourite thing in the world. Yeah. All they want is time with you, and you just melt, don't you? Yeah. Dogs, yeah, I'm one of those people now. The last one, then, is your legacy. I mean, where do you begin with you? You're an incredible individual, and I think that you're just starting. I think there's so much more ahead. So for now, in this moment, how would you articulate what you would like to be remembered for and known for? And when people say your name, what's the thing that they think of?
I want to be known for having played a part in transforming the fashion industry and the way that consumption is looked at altogether. And, I don't have a massive platform, but I also don't want to sell out. And that might take years, but I'd rather go about it that way. I believe reputation is very important. And I also believe this is a long game. So I want to be here 10 years, 15 years later. And that's what I want for ByRotation. I want it to be the global, solution to how people can share their fashion and other lifestyle premium items. So for me, it's about building something that can transform everyone's consumption habits. That is something that I want to be remembered for.
So listening to you speak, I think you're absolutely going to achieve that and more. And I can't wait to watch you thrive. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.